It's Our Time podcast is brought to you by Tech for Nonprofits Resource Hub, where we create content for our target groups, that is nonprofits, techies, and ecosystem enablers. TFN is a SaaS digital platform where we aim to connect nonprofit organizations with tech tools, solutions, talent, and emerging issues, and techies to social impact work. Welcome to the final episode in the Tech for Fundraising podcast series. My name is Kwoba Magero, founder and CEO of Tech for Nonprofits. We started off this discussion looking at how major funding cuts have affected nonprofits globally, and we interviewed Slumchild Foundation, a nonprofit based here in Nairobi, Kenya, and how they've been able to navigate these challenges so far. We also looked at how social enterprises and nonprofits can be able to diversify their funding ecosystem and improve their resource mobilization plan. In the previous episode, we interviewed Safaricom's M-Pesa as a local tech solution to support social enterprises and nonprofits in crowdfunding. I hope you've been able to have a look at those episodes. If not, all the links will be in the description box. In this episode, we were able to interview Sam Fankuchen, who is the CEO and founder of Golden. It's a US-based organization that supports social enterprises and nonprofits to be able to have access to tech tools and solutions that can support them within their internal operations. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
So I'm founder and CEO of Golden. For those who may be unfamiliar with Golden, we pioneered the concept of mobile-first end-to-end technologies for discovering and participating in acts of service in all forms for individuals. So that means everyday acts of kindness, in-person volunteering, virtual volunteering, disaster relief, peer-to-peer support, all kinds of other interactions that constitute a way of improving local communities everywhere. We also support end-to-end technologies for organizers in any sector to recruit, screen, schedule, track, re-engage, and scale up the efficacy of their supporters, principally volunteers and donors. And so we provide free and enterprise-grade technologies to facilitate all of that, often in full compliance of whatever applicable laws may be appropriate. So certainly privacy laws, but also the more demanding laws that are required to operate under when you're in really sensitive environments, healthcare environments, and so forth. Today, Golden is the most award-winning social impact software in the world. We are used by 48,000 organizers of every scale and in every sector, everything from local communities without a formal tax status, all the way up through large-scale entities like UNICEF and AARP, the Salvation Army, and much more. As I mentioned, I founded the organization in 2015. This is my second social venture in the space. Outside of Golden, I also sit on a number of boards that help guide thinking and best practices in the social impact, technology, disaster relief, and cross-sector collaboration spaces. I've also spoken at many different universities around the world on the subjects of cross-sector collaboration, disaster relief, innovation, social impact, entrepreneurship, and more. Recently, I was in Kenya after the USAID funding cuts were announced to understand what the ecosystem felt and what needs were most pressing and where everybody would like to see the future head. And it's also not just USAID, as those of us who receive funding from various institutional sources have realized, there's a wave of similar choices that are being made by funders in the UK and Netherlands and many other locations. And the reality is it doesn't matter specifically which choices were made at this point. What matters more is how do we understand the needs, meet the needs where they are, and build resilient systems that can help us improve quality of life. And external funding can be a real catalyst for that. but external funding can come from a number of places. And so building an organization that has the right kinds of on-ramps for all forms of supporters, whether those are everyday stakeholders that may wear a different type of hat than just a donor, or whether those are institutions or anything in between. So I'm delighted to be here. Kwoba may or may not have mentioned it. In case she has not, I'll also say that as a technology, Golden is designed to interoperate with other technologies or no technologies at all, just depending on where an organization is. So it's common that we will help folks who are on a mission go from 0 to 1 in originating their program and getting it up and running. And we will also work with hyper mature entities that have thousands of chapters and partners distributed all over the place with different requirements, often using different technologies, and often with the support of large-scale partners and resources that can come from them, often for free. For example, in Kenya, there's a very strong presence from Microsoft and their partnership team. You can also often get some of the world's best software on a grant and use it to, to take the next step. So whether resources come from us or they're not technology at all, or they come from other partners, it's important to have open eyes and to be looking everywhere you can to get the tools that make sense for you to adopt. One of the other concepts about technology and how it can truly be transformative is understanding when to apply it, because technology isn't always the best solution. Understanding the problem and meeting the problem where it is the most important thing. And then there may be technologies, or there may be behaviors, or there may be introductions or other things that can help address those needs optimally. But these days, especially in an era with AI becoming much more accessible, there is an opportunity to do large-scale transformation and micro transformation. At the time of this recording of this episode, we're in September of 2025. And what Kwoba had just mentioned is that over the summer of 2025, there have been some major global funding changes, not just United States related. This is everywhere, especially in regions that depend heavily on foreign aid. So where my mind goes, and what my field visits going to many of the largest grant recipients in Kenya would reinforce, is that the scale of the needs in these communities is significant. And in order to meet those needs over time, there have been large-scale funding programs in place, and often recurring grants from governments, from foundations, from corporations, to enable that scale of response. And because a substantial source of funding is now changed, then all of the other funders who are familiar with these programs have to make a choice about whether they fill the gap of a particular need or a particular entity, or whether they encourage other funders to help them meet a need, or whether they take resources out of places that they've been supporting because they believe that other grantees in their portfolio have a greater and more pressing need. And what's really important to keep in mind is not the academic and theoretical approaches, but the practical approaches today, these circumstances. Because if, for example, you're a medical clinic treating children for HIV, and you have 3 to 6 months of medicine supplies on hand, then you need to really think about how you're going to fix that problem. And that's what's most important. It's not just all the different things you could do, it's how you're going to get a very large challenge solved. And before thinking about technology or thinking about asks of donors or anything, I think everybody has to be clear and realistic about what the need is and what the ask about solving that need would be, and from whom, and why they are the best person to help advance that need. And often I will cite, and in fact have published a number of different pieces, one of which went live today in the Engage Journal, which is the leading global journal for practitioners leading volunteer management programs. about lessons that you can learn from disaster relief operators and apply to everyday settings. A lot of the constructs of what's happening in, for example, Kenya, but many other places right now, resembles a setting that looks more like a disaster, in that there are abrupt changes. There are immediate and medium and long-term consequences that hadn't been considered ahead of time by a variety of stakeholders. There's a finite pool of resources, and what everybody wants is to restore a quality of life on par with, and hopefully someday better than, the way things used to be for as many people as is possible. And so you have to pull all of the lessons out of disaster relief programming, which is have very easy on-ramps for anybody who's in any position to support to get on board. That could mean as a volunteer with no asks of them. It could mean immediate donations using tools like M-Pesa. It could be stronger corporate partnerships. It could be partnerships with other institutions that serve ancillary needs to similar audiences and understanding much quicker referral pathways. It could be on-time training of your staff instead of heavy training once a year. It could be compartmentalization of materials that you make sure you get to everybody who needs them in time to run their program effectively. It could be empowering people in the field. It could be digitizing things that haven't been digitized so that they're more accessible. There are a lot of different approaches, but you should have the mindset. Sometimes in public policy, there's a differentiation between wartime decisions and peacetime decisions. And when there's abrupt change on this kind of scale, you have to make quicker decisions the way you would in a time of war. As I don't mean to compare this to war. Just want to have the mindset of the operator be, make decisions quickly. There's a framework that we often refer to that's taught in the United States Air Force called the OODA loop, which it's OODA. It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And the most effective fighter pilots in the military are the ones who can complete that observation and action loop as quickly as possible, because that means there's more time to execute more decisions, more time to learn from decisions, and every best decision diminishes in value the longer that you wait to implement it. And what you really want to start with is a mindset of being hyper aware of the needs of your stakeholders, whose needs have increased, whose have a time horizon associated with it, and then start making really quick, smaller scale decisions so that you can iterate on getting some form of benefit to the people who need them and demonstrating a repeatable pattern of delivering benefit so that funders build trust and confidence in allowing your team to make and operationalize those decisions. That's at a very high level. Now, we can get much more specific than that. Volunteers tend to be the most valuable donors if you were looking at grassroots donors, and especially in places like Kenya, where there's a long history of local communities, tribal communities, people who understand the needs and the circumstances of those around them in very particular ways. You definitely want to lean in and apply, again, even more trust to your own communities and helping you identify and prioritize actions. Those are all human things, but technology can further enable it. And so make sure that you have pathways for keeping track of who the stakeholders are, where they are in their journeys, and where you can safely, appropriately automate the next step in those journeys so they don't depend on a human interaction in order to get to the end result. From the perspective of a funder, in circumstances like these circumstances, what a funder is probably looking for is clarity of understanding the needs and the stakeholders, having trust and having some framework of experience, being able to communicate changes that are being made to the program under today's circumstances, being able to communicate urgency and what could happen in a positive case or a negative case, depending on what funding is allocated and why the person you're talking to is precisely the right person to allocate the funding. And in a world that is shifting toward, thankfully, trust-based giving, meaning having relationships and then allowing your partner on the other end of the relationship to do what they do best, and not micromanaging or installing a specific framework on how that's done. I believe that's a good thing because local agents can interpret results and sort of encourage continuity in a way that, more abstracted, larger scale, more distant entities may not be able to. But in order to keep those relationships going, you need to have your own methods for communicating inputs and outputs of money and what the results of that money are. And those formulas and those storylines may change depending on the setting, but you should at least be able to put your finger on your own setting and why you've prioritized focus in the ways that you have prioritized it. That's what builds trust on the other side. So often that means having a clear mission, a clear set of roles and responsibilities toward achieving that mission, clear visibility into, for each of those roles and responsibilities, where things stand, productivity in whatever ways that you are tracking productivity, and scalability, reduction in costs over time, the value of network effects, and how you can activate people who've helped support your activities in a way that allows them to be repeatable and scalable and transferable other venues. Those are the kinds of innovations that funders are looking for. The world of just whoever speaks the loudest may not be the world that we're operating in today, but we could be in a world where true leaders, people who are really empathetic and who are very motivated to improve conditions, will be celebrated and rewarded. For anybody who'd like to learn more about Golden, you can go to goldenvolunteer.com and read all kinds of background on the organization. If your organization was either directly or indirectly affected by funding cuts, you may also be eligible for software grants from Golden. We made a $500 million commitment to help provide resources to entities whose activities have been disrupted by unforeseen large-scale changes to their funding. That's our part, doing our own corporate responsibility of helping get everyone back in motion. But it's obviously not enough to fill the scale of need around the world. And to do that, we need to work with a variety of other partners who offer their own forms of support. And we won't be able to do it forever. But for this moment in time, we're pleased to be able to help meet that need. And in fact, Kwoba, you may know this or may not know this, but about a month ago, I spoke at the United Nations about how to mobilize support across sector to meet these sorts of challenges. And so outside of the software universe, I'm also very familiar with the cross-sector partnership and policy universe about what kinds of entities are enabling growth right now. And I do think it will be a defining moment for looking at the next generation of social impact leaders and who is able to deliver value to very needy populations right now. So we've covered some of those themes, but I just want to reinforce that this is a special moment. As far as Golden goes, what I believe is most helpful right now for most people, and speaking in generalities is never a great idea, but for the sake of time, because this is a short podcast, we'll start with some generalities. Personally, I value tools that can be spun up and used right away, that don't have a long implementation timeline, that don't have long change management requirements, where you have to go through a security or compliance review. You need utilities that offer value right now, because if you don't, then everybody's just going to go to WhatsApp, or they're going to make phone calls, or they're just going to do whatever's easier, which will be even less safe. And so Golden's tools are designed to be up and running in seconds. They can work on any internet connected device, including in low bandwidth environments. We offer mobile applications that can be downloaded and used offline. And having a technology ecosystem that works in various settings, regardless of language, regardless of connectivity, regardless of entity, whether it's nonprofit, for-profit, government, et cetera, those are really important. Having systems that do not require data entry, wherever possible, that can automate data collection is also really important, because you will save 1 to 2 days of time per week in team members moving information around. You will have current information instead of late information. You will have consistency in the way that that information is entered instead of each person's choice on how they'd like to enter the information. And with real-time information, you can make better real-time decisions, like we were talking about that OODA loop scenario. If the information's in front of you and you're not questioning whether it's valid or if it's complete, then you have a much better chance of making the best decision sooner so that you can meet the needs of people sooner, or so that you can recognize how many people you served and what outcomes they had sooner and get funding for yourself sooner. It's also really important that when you choose technologies, those technologies are interoperable. Meaning, if you have other systems like a CRM system or a marketing system, that data from one system can automatically go to the other into the right place and trigger downstream actions like emails to ask for donations, things like that. That's critical. Something else that's critical is having interoperable systems with your partners. If you're choosing a technology that only works for one program or one chapter or one location of your organization or only your organization, you're going to have a hard time synchronizing what you know to be true with what your funder believes is true, with what your government thinks is true. And having an environment where you can authorize people from other entities to collaborate with you on projects isn't just effective for reaching a better outcome for your project. It gives your partners more trust, more agency to fund or enable initiatives in the right moment or work with you to scale those initiatives. So Golden software is designed to provide a collaborative environment for anybody. You can bring your partners on board for free. They can have the right access controls to your programs or you to theirs for either promotion or for coordination or just reporting. You can make all of those choices in real time, just using different switches on a dashboard. And so we're really proud to offer tools like that. That had obviously resulted in us receiving recognition from a variety of entities, including the United States federal government and the Gates Foundation and IDEO and others. And so we're quite proud of the ability to do that. I think it's also makes Golden unique. For that reason, you can get it directly, or you can also get it from a lot of the biggest software companies in the world who distribute it as though it's their own software. And part of that has to do with the quality that we try to put in the products, but part of it has to do with philosophy that we genuinely want this to be an additive layer for people who are mission oriented and getting the job. Anybody is interested in those grants, software grants, please go to usaidrelief.org and you can fill out a 30-second form and our team will get back to you as soon as we can. And organizations' goals are vary widely. So, you know, in one case that comes to mind is a women's health organization that I'm thinking of that was started by one lady and an Instagram account. And within 1 year, they were able, just with Instagram and Golden, to get 13 chapters of this program off the ground, you know, popularizing and understanding and sort of destigmatization of female hygiene, all the way through distributing these products to thousands of women with hygiene needs. They were able to do that within 1 year. We also helped a 100-year-old organization in the United States quadruple the productivity of their program within 2 years in terms of activating numbers of volunteers, hours, and value of the volunteer labor that they've created. Globally, as I mentioned before, we've partnered with entities that may have a federated model, meaning they operate under a unified brand, but local offices can conduct their own activities however they wish. An example of that, to some degree, would be something like UNICEF that I mentioned before. You know, UNICEF's priorities change every 4 years or so with which category of social issues are most relevant to the well-being of children. But every time that those priorities change, for example, in South Africa, UNICEF can work with a variety of third-party entities to accelerate the delivery of specific needs that affect children every time that the area of focus for children's well-being changes and which operators of programs are most relevant to the latest thematic category. Recently, on the natural disaster side of things, we've helped Suu Kyi and Salvation Army and the state of California government and a lot of corporations respond to the wildfires in Los Angeles, which personally affected me. My family was displaced, our office was displaced. And as I was going through that experience as a survivor of that emergency, our team also had a lot of visibility into how the government, private sector, nonprofit, faith actors were responding to the needs that emerged. And so there's a pretty broad spectrum of what kinds of activities are important and what results are important. But for today's conversation, I think some takeaways would be, it's easy to get started. You can start transferring all the programs you've been doing offline to this, or all the ones that you've had in separate pieces of software to this, and then have the data go and update those other pieces of software that you're using. And if you're trying to build a much tighter pipeline of converting volunteers to donors so that you can diversify your funding sources and take control over meeting your own funding needs with local supporters, then the way to begin that journey is to start by having more accessible volunteer programs, because a donor isn't always and only a donor, and everybody is being asked for donations all the time. And so instead, if you're trying to build a trust with those people, you should begin by specifying what you're doing, what the need is, why they can help, how they can help, making it easy for them to help, showing them what they did, and then asking them if they're ready to do something more to close the gap of needs that remain. And you can do that when you have the right technology, and also when that technology is so easy to use that it gets out of the way and everybody focuses on the human experience. And so you should always be using your gut feel and your stomach to make sure that you feel confident about those choices. Is this as good as we could possibly offer somebody so that they trust us, so they want to work with us, so that they give to their potential, not just sometimes against the requests that we give them. Just out of empathy for this moment in time and how everybody feels, which is like the needs are immense. If you're aware and you're really dedicating yourself and your organization to meeting needs of stakeholders, I think it would be ignorant to just talk about technology and not recognize the magnitude of the circumstances right now. And so funders are aware of that. Other partners out there in the ecosystem are aware of that. And this is your moment to meet those needs. And everybody will remember who met the needs. The world will move forward. And there will be things in the future that are even harder than this. But what we're looking for right now as an ecosystem of people advancing circumstances is to see who's capable. And to be capable, you have to have that fire within you. You have to have that energy, and you have to know that you're capable of rising to this occasion. And I believe many listening to this podcast are. And you can start small. Start with what you know. Make sure that you are asking questions about technology from people you trust. You should absolutely have people you can at least ask, if not people who can help you do what you need to do. Don't try and do everything yourself. Look for partnerships where you can, everywhere you can, and focus on excellence and focus on meeting your own standards and being able to communicate those standards very effectively. And then all kinds of technologies, hopefully including Golden and Microsoft's technologies and a variety of others, can help you do the next things easily, so that you can conserve your energy for the important interactions and not consume it with stuff that doesn't give you results.
All resources and links that Sam Fankuchen has mentioned in the interview will be linked in the description as well. You can follow us in all our socials on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and we'll be able to continue sharing these kind of resources to you and your community. Thank you.